Hello, family, and welcome to another episode of Role Model Experts Cafe. I'm your host, Dr. El, the Parent Whisperer, and today with me, I have an amazing lady from UK, Miss Bethan Mary Thompson. Did I say everything right?
You did.
Very good. Bethan, I've had the opportunity to see you over the past few months, basically at different networking events and experts events, and I love how you show up. So audience members, I decided to ask Bethan to come in and tell us a little bit more about what she does and her expertise, because I believe that it needs to be on your radar. So Bethan, take it away. Tell us what you do and how you got involved with what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yes, I'm a former caregiver. I looked after my late mum who had cancer, and then unfortunately later on she had cancer and vascular dementia. She'd had multiple falls, and obviously there are signs which I know now which I can help people with, and people thought it was just age, but obviously it wasn't. It was the brain deteriorating. I was arrested, unfortunately. But luckily I'd done journaling, and I definitely recommend that to people. And that is one of the reasons that I started when my mum passed away after 6 months. She had cancer and vascular dementia. So I set up my company. I joined a leadership in COVID, and then I started working as a public speaker, helping the NHS in UK, and then obviously doing work and heading towards my own company, which is called Night Butterfly, and helping others now recognise how dementia progresses and how they can look after them, whether it's healthy eating, equipment at home, and the various things for their own mindset and how they can help their own self-care.
Awesome. Bethan, thank you so much for what you do. I know that you also do public events and try to raise awareness and funds for it. So I really appreciate it. Now, many of our audience members are, busy parents, right? So they're like, oh, one more thing on my plate. But one of the things that I think it's important for them to realize, or for us to recognize, is the fact that many parents, while their focus is on their kids, they also have parents themselves, right? And as we are starting to age and live longer, these things become much more common in the elderly population. Now, the other thing is that vascular dementia specifically is something that is not just age-related neither, because it has to do with cardiovascular. So tell us a little bit more about what are some of the typical challenges that you end up seeing when people come to you with this, or loved ones that they have.
Communication is huge, and it's very much a case of not arguing with them. A lot of people tend to argue because they get frustrated with their stress, and they're saying, they repeat it. My late mum used to say, hello, 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 and you want to go to the toilet, or you want to get dressed in your clothes, and you have to sit down and you have to talk to them clear and understanding. And for some people that don't have the tolerance, it can be very difficult. It's also number two, I would say, eating. If they see things on, a big plate, they're not going to eat it. And one of the things that I did, and I have a checklist, which I've created as a PDF for people, which I'm working on, is to things like, I had to buy certain cutlery, because obviously they like to feel independent. And I think that's hugely important, that the challenge is that they still feel part of being here and not lose their independence and keep them very much as if part of our world and not just in their own little world and that. And it can be lonely. It's very, very lonely. And I think that if you are caring at home like I was, we didn't have this technology. We didn't have, all the extras. So you have to find things that you can do yourself, and the journaling, and that certainly helped me back then, and has certainly helped me after, adjust to a time where you have to say your goodbyes. And transforming can be very hard for people, because you've grieved for the living. And I think a lot of people have not recognized that either.
So I have a question for you. This condition, is this a sudden thing that can come about, or gradual, or both, or what's most common on this?
I think for people assume it's memory loss and that, but a lot of people from COVID are actually suffering from brain fog. A lot of women are going through the menopause, for example, which is being talked about. I've got brain fog. So it can come either way. For us, my mum was getting confused and that, and unfortunately, some people need to understand that it could be aging, but it also could be the signs. One of the important signs was obviously with the cancer was the losing of weight. You know, my mum had a tumour between the bowel and bladder, and I was concerned. And if I had male or female friend that started losing weight dramatically, I would immediately say they needed to go and see their doctor, because I was contacting the doctors and saying, you know, I was doing a journal saying my mum's losing weight, and they were saying no, there's nothing wrong. She was being sick all the time, and we were back and forth the hospital, and eventually they found the tumour. So you can't stop it. You can obviously do things to help to slow things down, but reality, there is so many, as you know, diagnosis of frontal dementia. You know, dementia covers everything. And also people don't always understand that there's vascular dementia and there's dementia. So vascular dementia is a lot more than dementia. So it's not just one thing. So I think that, and that's important for people to recognize, because as the disease progresses, you know, that then you have the challenges that stops eating. So obviously you have to think about how to feed them, how to dress them, and do all those other things. And as we go into different seasons, whether you're in America or here, how you're going to actually keep that dignity going.
Right. And from my understanding, vascular dementia is a bit more difficult to actually address, because there's been a lot of research on dementia itself, about prevention, about management. But when it comes to vascular, like you said, like COVID, like something that you don't expect has any relation to mental health. And I personally know two people that were in the executive area of business, and after COVID, they had like what we call the brain fog, basically, to such a degree that they're completely different personalities. They've been affected very much with it. There's a genetic component to it. So, so basically, this was a big red flag that we saw, and really it affects your lifestyle in a big way. So, so what are some of the things that you see as far as frustrations for people who are trying to change things or try to grasp this? Like, what are the typical frustrations? Because I know there's a part about realizing that a loved one might be suffering this, but then there's also the part where you actually have to take action to do certain things to now accommodate for this. So what are some of those things that you see?
The things that I have learned, or I did, obviously I played music all day long, and that as much as possible, and that, and did exercises, and that even though she was in a chair, we still do exercises and that. And you know, as you get old, even yourself and that, you know, we've just been through COVID and that, you try and do these exercises, so you get routines. So you have almost as if you're working, you have that like coffee time or tea time in the mid-morning. So you actually turn the music on, you actually maybe read a book with them, or often when I went out, night sitters would actually read nursery rhymes to my mum, even when she was in bed, because they can still hear. So we try to keep that routine, the washing routine, the bed routines, obviously, that's a challenge in itself. And you have to have try and get your self-care time as well, which is the hardest thing, because when the carers go away and you're at home and you need to lift them, then obviously you need to get to know how to lift them properly and manage those things, and how to manage your healthy eating as well, to make sure you've got that energy level and get your sleep. Because obviously I ended up in crisis, and the things that I've learned is we had joint bills. So we were able to, I didn't have that time for power of attorney, but I had joint bills. So it didn't resolve all of it, but some of it, you know. And I'll give a great example. I did a talk not long ago, and I said to people, if you put a pair of trainers on somebody who's got dementia, that would take an hour and a half. And I did special training on this on Dementia Friends. And as we all know, you can go on any online like things now, sketches and that, and you can see that you can buy sketches with a zip. And if you think about it, like to anybody out there, how many cups of tea or coffee or just having that 5 minutes to read an email could you do by not having to think about hours and hours of trying to put trainers on, which is simple for you and me, but to try and put it on for somebody with dementia is very hard. You know, it's like, I wish, you know, there's things like duvets. Now you've got these duvets that can dry in 5 minutes, whereas you're washing, we're all concerned about energy. And that, you know, everyone in the world, where you're there and where I am here, people are talking about energy, how they're going to buy food, how they're going to, like, you know, for your aging parents. But you can buy those things and prepare those things so that even pillows, you know, that if they throw a cup of coffee over you, which they do, and a cup of tea, we've had it, that you can think, you can put them in the wash, they're going to be dry. Even pajamas, nighties now, that if it's a man's shirt, there's so much more out there now that you can buy to prepare, and almost prepare the things for yourselves as well, to make your life and your time management better.
So Bethan, we're talking a lot about the management and once you're in the situation, but also, are there anything that our audience members could do or could advise to, let's say, the people around them regarding prevention and preparation, if they know this is something that might be happening, or this would be something that they could prevent? Is there such a thing?
I think the main thing is that once you see somebody starting to lose their memory, they can create a memory book. We made videos, and obviously people make scrapbooks and photos, and that is quite cool to, like, if you're wearing a shirt and that, and if your father, for example, was starting to things, is wearing things that they would recognize it's you, and not changing anything too much. So, and I tried to do that even when my mum was in hospital, so that I wore earrings, and, you know, and so she knew I was her daughter, because when they start losing your identity, that can be quite challenging mentally for you. So I think you have, and as they lose their identity, you're losing your parents as they were, and you can't bring them back. And it's important to talk to them about the past. And if they are talking about, for example, I'll give a great example. If they are talking about having hallucinations, for example, and they're talking about ghosts, people will hallucinate. You just go along with it. And that is a way of preparing, and that, because you will understand more about the disease and more about how you can cope with it yourself mentally. So you can prepare for the things, you can prepare for after, the grief and everything to a certain extent, because you know you're going to have to say your goodbyes and that. But whilst you're in that growing period and that, it's important to remember that you want to tell them you love them every day.
Right.
You know, that you want to keep telling them, because that's the one thing I did, and I would say to anybody, long before my mum was ill on the first time, I would tell her just in case anything happened. Because if you're going to tell your parents anything, that if you've got a good relationship with them, or you don't want anything left unsaid, So, and I think it's important for them to hear it, because their last thing is what they hear.
Right. Actually, what you said is really important in the sense that making connections, neural connections through experience is a very important part of our brain maintaining its integrity. So when you, like you said, wearing a shirt that they recognize or they remember, sometimes they might be losing a part of their brain, but then because their visual field stores things in a different place, they can access it indirectly from a different place. So it enables them to hold on to their memories, their identity, and their life experiences that much longer, and ultimately, as a result, be able to connect with you and the outside world, because they have a better sense of who they are. Because that's the big thing, that as people lose their sense of self and who they are, then it becomes more difficult for them to interact with the world around them as well. So this is really important what you just mentioned, Beth, and thank you for expressing that. Now, how can I know that this is something that is so pervasive in like little aspects of your life, especially when you're talking about a loved one that has filled so many different buckets in your life. There are lots of tips, tricks, and things that you can learn. So how can people connect more with you and learn more about this?
Yes, people can contact me on LinkedIn on Bethan Thompson 55@gmail.com. And I am on Twitter, Bethan Thompson, and I'm on Facebook as well. But my main contact is through Bethan Thompson 55@gmail. And two last things I think that are important for people is that even when I was out, I had bought notebooks, and I used to get the carers to write what my mum said. So that, and I give a great example, I think people are going to love this. She used to say things like, "Oh, Bethan's going to get married to a daffodil," because they get confused about things. And she would come out with little sayings, and they'll come out with things and you'll laugh. But after, you can go back, and those can bring such joy to us and think so much more that can help us go through that grieving process. And I think the other thing that I was taught when I went to counselling that I do recommend to people is that I write to my mum. Now, some people burn the letters, but I have written to my mum constantly from the 5 years that my mum's died. And sometimes it's a week, sometimes, and a lot of people I have met have done that, and it's brought them more to go through those 7 stages of grieving. And I think that's how you can prepare, because I think doing all of the learning, going on the training, and that the dementia training, which I did, and the training that is offered there to people that you can get, or if you want to know more, and my workshops or my things that are talks and that, then it all helps. And that's important, because the more understanding you get, it's going to help you, and you can choose your action. What goes for one person may not the other, but it's about making them relaxed, making them feel as if they're still here.
Actually, when you were mentioning that, it reminded me of cleaning out your attic. And when you're going through the attic and you see all the old stuff that you had and you re-experience that, it's such an awakening process. And imagine that for your loved ones as well, when you create these things as you go along, or even for yourself, if you are suffering from the dementia, to be able to re-experience things because of the things that you've created. So thank you for doing that and mentioning that.
Well, we're going to be blessed, because my mum was a war evacuee. So if you think about it, people will get a chance to grow up with our parents, but not when they're like 3 or 5, and to hear what they were like then, to capture those moments. If you can capture as much of that as possible, then you can pass that on to your children, because you only remember so much of your childhood. You're only going to remember, but for how many of us know our parents when they're 3 or 5, other than what they tell us?
It's a different topic, but it is important. There was an expert that I had interviewed earlier that talked about how generationally, the most we know is usually about 2 to 3 generations back. and we don't have a sense of identity of who our ancestors are, and how what you're describing is such a critical part of also your family tree as well. So it affects it in so many different ways. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here. Guys, since we're talking about connections and neural connections and dementia, I just want to also make sure that you know that the information regarding Bethan and how to connect with her is in the description of this video. So I do encourage you guys to go ahead and check it out. Make connections outside of yourself, not just within your brain. Connecting is how we survive and thrive in our society and also in our own brains. So role model this behavior for your kids. Build strong connections, build a lot of connections, and basically leave a legacy as well for the generations to come. Thank you, Bethan, for being here. Any final words for our audience members before we finish?
Thank you for listening. Hopefully that you've gained some golden nuggets, and if you'd like to gain some more, please do come and connect with me. I'd love to hear from you, and if I can help anyone out there, that is my mission, and I'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. If you guys haven't already done so, make sure you click subscribe on the channel so that you get notified of all the experts like Bethan that come here, share their expertise and their gifts with you. And we'll see you on the future episodes. Cheers.